Hi, Stacy. Welcome to the Soul Spark podcast. How are
Hey,
you?
hey, Kelly. I am doing wonderfully. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to
Excellent.
talk about all that we have kind of on the itinerary today. It's going to be a good
Right.
one.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm just going to dive right in and ask you the first question that I ask all of my guests, which is what sparks your soul?
Yeah. So I think, the interesting thing is that this has evolved for me, and where I'm at now in my life is what really sparks my soul is connection. And when I say connection, I mean it in the most intimate sense and in the largest sense. So, connection with the self, which I think is first and foremost. And I think most people miss that part.
Mhm.
And then connection with people and community and purpose, connection with the earth and the universe and all of those things. And for me, when I feel that connection is really when I feel the most alive. And I think, and I said it evolved for me. And I think, at a certain time in my life, and it was completely trauma informed, I would have said what sparks my soul is like success, quote unquote, and it's
Mhm.
the like typical ways of like money and like all that stuff and achievement. And I say it was trauma informed because I recognize that was from childhood learning learning that I had to like take care of myself and do it on my own and all that stuff and don't let people get too close because they could hurt you. And now it's like 180-degree opposite, which is like, no,
Mhm.
no, guys, come, let's do this. Let's all do this.
Come into my
Um,
bubble.
yeah, yeah. So that connection, I think, really sums it up. That sparks my soul. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
beautiful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I was literally thinking about that last night. And we'll talk about um the plant medicine that you work with. I'm really excited to learn more
Yeah.
about that.
Mhm.
I lead cacao ceremonies, and I led one last night with a good friend of mine. And I was just thinking about how, the reason we are there is because I want to share these rituals and these gifts that I've received. But at the same time, I also realize like if I'm having a day where I'm down and I'm tired and I go into a situation like that where I really get to connect with the earth and other people, I'm totally lit up, like re-energized, like all of that energy that I was like not feeling comes back. And yeah, so what you just said completely resonates with
Yeah.
me. I think it's so powerful to remember that connection, especially with ourselves, like you said, first and foremost, is
Right.
really everything. And from that connection, everything else can follow, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. I think, when we look at people, when I look at people, a lot of times they're wonderful, not all the time, but a lot of the times they're really good givers, but they're really bad at receiving, right? And
Totally.
that's an indication to me that there's some sort of disconnect from the self because we need to have both. It's a balance of connecting to the self, understanding what we need to fill us, whether it's physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, we need to be able to receive, but we would only understand that and know that we're receiving it if we're connected to ourselves. And so yeah, I think that's probably a pretty big journey for most people, is just connecting
Absolutely.
back to themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I would say the friends of mine that are the best gift givers, they're like the most thoughtful people, always just like thinking of the sweetest things and like the ways to light other people up. They always say like, I feel so uncomfortable when people give me gifts and do things for me. And I think that's the perfect example of, the people that are so thoughtful towards other people also need to learn to be able to receive it for themselves. So yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit about your journey to, becoming a PhD of natural medicine and a spiritual wellness
Yeah.
practitioner and,
Yeah.
all of the things that you're doing in the world today, which sound incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to. It started in utero in my mom's womb.
Isn't that where it always starts?
It always starts there. And I somewhat jest about that, but of course I do believe that that's where at least it all starts, right? And I think
Mhm.
for me personally, my exploration into what initially was health, professionally anyway, and then also spiritually, personally, was what I always say, it's like all research is me search, right? So I was trying to understand me, basically. And part of that, again, did come from in utero and when I experienced there and as a kid and all that stuff. And so this kind of led me on to parallel paths, which now are together, but at the time I experienced them as two parallel paths. And so one of them was professionally and fitness wise and related to the physical body. And my dad used to go to he's a black belt, third degree in Taekwondo. And so I used to like train with him and I watched him do all that stuff. And so like I was fascinated with the body and how it moved and all of that stuff. And so I went on and got my certification in training and started, doing one-on-one training, and then built a boot camp here in New York City, which was the first all year outdoor boot camp city in New York City back in 1999, which was kind of one of the boutique fitness classes that sparked, these boutique fitness classes that we see throughout the world. And at the same time, I was on this spiritual path, and I grew up in New York City in the Bronx, which is not exactly aligned with spirituality, right? But always having this like sense of inner wonder and knowing and like asking the questions, like there's got to be more to life than what I'm seeing here. And so I think both of these paths were happening at the same time. My spiritual path led me to get to find my first teacher, who was a Siddha master of the Tamil tradition, which is southern India. And we studied meditation and sound and mantra, and had the opportunity to work with scientists to understand like what's going on in the brain and body with these different types of tools and techniques. And then that led me to my second teacher, who is a Hopi medicine woman. And that's where I apprenticed with her for 8 years and began working with plant medicine. And that was about 15 years ago, and got initiated into that and now carried my own medicine. And then professionally, I was still doing the boot camp. I went on to get a nutrition certification, so started working with food. And as I was kind of going on these two parallel paths, I started recognizing in people, no matter what they were doing in the physical realm, eating, sleeping, exercising, that if this stuff, the emotional, psychological, spiritual stuff, wasn't in alignment, then their physical body was never going to like be or look or perform the way they were wanting it to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had also just a lot of personal spiritually kind of guided experiences that changed my physical body. So I knew there was something going on. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I've actually experienced it. Like I've actually experienced healing in my own body that had nothing to do with, exercise or nutrition. I mean, of course it all works together, but they were more spontaneous healings that occurred in these experiences. So I wanted to know what was going on. I was like, how is this possible? And so that eventually led me to go back to school to get PhD in natural medicine, where then I was able to start understanding what's happening when we change our thinking, feeling patterns and spiritual patterns, or our belief systems, let's say, how that affects our physical body, and vice versa. How, if we're treating our body like shit, how that's also going to affect our emotional, psychological, and spiritual selves. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I got to where I am now.
I love it. I also started out in a fitness background, and that was kind of my big realization too, because I was noticing I would have these clients that would lose all this weight. They would work so hard and then they could not maintain it, you know? And I was like, what is happening? Like something is not changing,
Right.
um, that needs to change for them to actually be able to change how they're looking and feeling in their lives. And I found through the spiritual path that fusing those two together is really where it's at. Cause like you said it so beautifully, but the mind and our emotional state of being has to be in line with what we're trying to do with our physical body. And I had random
Right.
spontaneous like healings as well. And I loved hearing that from you, because I feel like it's hard. I don't hear that from other people very often. Just
Right.
how even just changing how you're thinking and feeling, that can change your whole physique. It really can.
Right.
So it's just the most powerful link, and to be able to fuse them together is what the world, I think, really needs, mind, the body, the soul.
Right. Yeah. And even I think just the way, sorry
Oh, no,
to
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I think that just even the word, and I say it too, mind, body, spirit, like even like making this separation, even in the words that we use, we're not separated. You can't have a mind without a body, and you can't
Mhm.
have a body without a mind, and you can't have body mind without some sort of something out there, you know?
Mhm.
And so even creating, even our languaging does not allow us to properly express the experience that we're having.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot in the English language. I think other languages have like more in-depth words that encompass more. Would you
Right.
say? Like, would you agree with
Agreed.
that? Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm just thinking unrelated necessarily to body mind stuff, but like in Arabic, they have like 50 different words for nap. It's like the
Love it.
mid-afternoon nap, the little 10-minute nap, and there's so many, and it's just, yeah, English language does not have the words to to express this
They're very
properly.
basic.
Exactly.
Should we start creating new words to add to like the dictionary?
I am so on board with that.
You and me. This can be our next
Okay,
project. I love
we're in.
it. Well, I feel like, talking about that, I think talking about how our thoughts and beliefs like directly impact our health would be a good thing to start to like dive into a little bit more. And right, it's not just like our physical health, it's our mental, emotional health. And we know that in this country, I mean, obesity is a huge epidemic, but so is mental health. That's a big kind of epidemic now as well. So I think it's really important to think about health on all of those different levels. But yeah, do you just want to talk a little bit more about, your teachings on how your thoughts and beliefs impact health?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, to put it in a nutshell, or to make it somewhat simple, um, anything, our nervous system does not filter for content, right? Meaning, whether there's actually an attack happening, a saber-toothed tiger, a dinosaur, like whatever it is, or my own body. I don't like my own body. Your nervous system is not like, well, that's not really a threat, but that is a threat. It's detecting any sort of um, negative emotion as a potential threat. And so your body goes into stress response, right? And so when you're in stress response, any function of the body not specifically related to survival of that organism, meaning um, immune system function, metabolic function, digestion, any of that stuff is going to be shut down or decreased because your body is just like, we have to survive. And so if we're having any of these thoughts that are perceived negative threats or perceived threats, then our body is going to react by being stressed And then any function of the body, rest and repair or anything like that, is not going to be working well. And so that's like, in a very condensed way, how our thoughts and feelings affect our body. Does
Mm-hmm.
that all make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So in a very like simple way, like when we're having these negative thoughts, whatever they are, when we're having these negative emotions, whatever they are, our body is releasing neural impulses and biochemicals in line with those thoughts and feelings. And those are going to have a detrimental effect in the long run anyway, on our body, on our cells, on our cell reproduction, on the waste removal, on every function of the body, basically. Now, when I say that, though, I would also like to say that doesn't mean we should all be what I call toxic positivity. Like we shouldn't all, like we don't want to avoid the feelings. We want to feel the feelings fully and then allow them to pass through our body so that they're not trapped. Because it's when they get trapped in our bodies is when they start. That's when the chronic issues start.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when those thoughts and feelings get trapped in our body is when the mental state kind of starts to go on loop with whether it's anxious or depressive or just like stressed out, worry type thoughts. And then I think we get into, like a loop with it and we get kind of stuck. And then something has to like, usually, I mean, from a spiritual perspective, something will shake us up to like try to get us out of it.
Right.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Definitely.
Yeah, that's totally right. It's only when the emotions are stuck that they do that loop thing. And that's what I mean. That's like the stress response is actually a healthy part of surviving as a human, as an animal, right? It keeps us alive and allows us to survive. But when it's chronic, that's the issue, and that's where we get caught in those loop patterns. So the thinking, feeling loops and behaving loops, and then we're like, I feel stuck, or like, why do I always get into the same relationship, or why can't I make this much money, and why do I always feel like, and it's just like it's working with all of those emotions that are stuck in the body, and that when we release them, that allows us to be more flexible in our lives and be more fluid and not be so rigid in these holding patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk a little bit about your character armor assessment that you do? Because I think that will lead into us talking about ways in which to release those thoughts and those emotions that are causing us to be in that chronic stress, and then so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So character armor, I love this stuff. It's every time I do an analysis on someone, they're like, how did you know that? It seems like magic, but once you know how to do it, it's not magic.
Yeah, I'm like, do it on me. I'm here. Sounds so cool. I love it.
So basically, the concept of character armor is that when we have issues, chronic and or intense enough experiences during developmental times in our lives, specifically in utero to about 7 or 8 years old, and those experiences are not expressed, meaning they're repressed or unresolved, then they wire into the tissue, to the nervous system, lock into the posture, and eventually affect the musculature of the body. And so by looking at how a person holds their body, by looking at their posture and their movement patterns, I can understand what some of their primary emotional and psychological obstacles have been based off of their childhood experiences. So I'll give you an example. If I go into this posture, what kind of sense do you get from me?
That I mean, I get the sense that you are kind of withdrawn or insecure. Maybe you feel
Right.
a lack of like confidence.
Exactly.
support. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are all universal body positions that,
Mhm.
once you start knowing how the body reacts to certain experiences, then you get the emotional understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
So what I do is a character armor analysis. So basically I can look at someone and I could understand what their psychological emotional issues are, what the issues are with their bioenergy fields or chakra systems, as some people call them. And then from there, first, the benefit of that is that, our minds are conditioned to protect us. Our minds want to keep us alive and
Mhm.
surviving.
Mhm.
And so our minds typically will play a trick on us, right? It's like it will try to defend us and protect us from those emotions that were too overwhelming to feel when we were kids. So sometimes when we're talking to someone, if I look at someone and I say, "Oh, this is your issue," they're like, "No, it's not." Because their mind is still doing that protective thing, which is
Yeah.
great. We want it there in some way. We want it to protect us. But this is a way to almost bypass that conditioning and just look to understand what the body is saying, right? And
Mhm.
and it, in a, if we think about it, body language is really the first language that we learn. As a child, we don't understand English, but we could understand, we get the sense, we pick up the sense, and we could see the face of our caregivers, and we kind of understand what the body means, maybe not in language, but energetically we get that sense.
Yeah.
So this is just an advanced version of that. Now, so that's good because we want to get around the conditioning and we want to get into working with releasing those emotions. So, what I call a bottom up approach. If we work with the sensations and emotions in the body, then that's going to start changing the thoughts we have, those repeated loops that we talked about, and that's ultimately going to affect our behavior. Whereas I think in a lot of ways, talk therapy starts up here, right? It starts with, okay, I'm becoming aware of my pattern. I've thought it through. I understand where it comes from, but I'm still doing it. I still get triggered by things, right? And so it's
Mhm.
like there is a benefit to talking for sure, to bring awareness to it and to recognize and
Yeah.
understand it. But that ultimately usually does not change the experience inside,
Yeah, that
right?
awareness is so important, but
Right.
you have to work with the body to release what's actually in the body
Right. Exactly.
that's been like stored
Exactly.
in there for maybe your whole life or half your life.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so doing this type of character armor analysis allows me to just like, okay, I see what your thing is. We don't even have to go into the narrative. And also sometimes the narrative is too hard. Like I work with a lot of people who have had serious trauma. So by talking about it is not always the best thing, because people can be re-traumatized by that. So
Mhm.
working through the body, we're able to gently start shifting things around and not re-traumatizing, basically doing it in a gentle way, allowing the nervous system to get more resilient, right? Allowing it to
Mhm.
like build just a little bit beyond what is normally comfortable. And eventually the idea is to building a container or building the nervous system to be resilient enough where it can hold those intense emotions and know it doesn't have to collapse or freeze or avoid or numb out or soothe. It knows, okay, these are
Mhm.
big feelings here, but I know I can hold these feelings. Where if you can only hold this amount, then anything over here is going to be way too overwhelming, you know?
Mhm.
So that's really one of the ways that I really like working with people, because it allows us to bypass the story, the narrative, the conditioning, the defenses, and just get to like, what is the thing,
Yeah.
and also, I mean, a lot of times our trauma, our imprinting, whatever you want to call it, starts, pre-verbally. So oftentimes we don't even have the story. We don't even know. We're just like, I'm just depressed. I don't know why. And, we can usually eventually trace it back to, oh yeah, because, maybe when your mom was pregnant, she was super stressed, and that doesn't mean she doesn't love you or anything like that. It was just like, she was very stressed. So you in some way didn't get what you needed in utero. So, it's a really helpful way to access that stuff outside of all the like protective measures that we put up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I have an energy healer that I see, and months ago we uncovered I had this like sadness that I held in my chest, and it was from being in utero. And it's just so important for people, I think, to remember that most of this stuff happens during a time that you have no control over any of it. So it's like all you can do as an adult is to realize you want to make changes and then find the help that you need, and like you said, talking about it is good, but it can only get you so far,
Exactly.
What are some of the like physical practices that you use to help release these traumas and feelings and all emotions from the body?
Yeah. So I always start first when I'm working with people with a process. We do, first is neuromodulation, right? So that is, can we teach the nervous system when it gets a little bit blown out to come back to homeostasis, to come back to balance? So one of those exercises would be a simple orienting exercise. So an orienting exercise is basically working with the senses and trying to sense as much as you can in that moment. So as an example, I might have someone, visually looking around the room, taking in as much detail as possible. So what we're telling the nervous system is, when you're under stress, your body, your nervous system zeroes in on that particular threat, right? If you're under stress, it doesn't make any sense to be able to tell that flower over there is beautiful if there's a snake rattling in front of you that might kill you, right? So literally your nervous system zeroes into the threat. So by looking around the room, what we're telling the nervous system is, oh, there's no threat, because now I can take in a lot more information. And then go through the senses, right? So, okay, maybe close your eyes. What do you hear? Okay, you're probably hearing my voice, but can you hear anything else somewhere else? Maybe you hear birds outside, maybe if there are kids in the park, whatever it is, right? So and again, we're showing the nervous system, or the nervous system is getting the message that it's safe. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be just the basic grounding exercise. And these are very, very simple ones. I'm sure, you've probably heard of them. Probably your listeners have heard of them. But I say them because these are the basic things. And of course, most people want to like skip to the I stand on one hand and I pat my head while chanting, oh, But I always start with the basics, because it really is a matter of teaching the nervous system step by step that container, right? If you're here, we want to get you here, and we want to get you here, and then we want to get you here, and then we want to get you here. So those are two basic ones. Another one is what I call like tracking your breathing. So as an example, this is an interesting one where, as I started doing it, I recognized I can breathe into my diaphragm pretty well, but I noticed that if I have my hand here, my chest does not expand at all. So it's almost like the air goes like a straw and then into my diaphragm. And that makes sense in terms of my character armor, because I'm armored up around my chest and my heart, right?
Oh, okay.
So it makes sense. So part of my practice, my personal practice, is to have my hand on my heart and then breathe and try to see if I can expand my chest open. And then another version of that is, okay, can I expand it not just in the front, but can I feel it expanding in the back? And so this simple exercise is quite interesting, because you're going to notice, when you're in tune with yourself anyway, you're going to notice where your armoring is physically. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Breath work is like one of the biggest tools that I work with. It's just, it's so powerful for so many
Right.
reasons. But
Right.
I find that so, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just so interesting to think of it in that capacity, like as far as like the armor goes and where we typically breathe. Um, and I don't want to interrupt you. I want to hear the
Yeah.
rest of them, but I'm
Yeah.
interested a little bit more about the character armor. Like,
Yeah.
if and it kind of going back in case people aren't watching, when you were originally doing the posture, it was like your shoulders were rounded, your chin was down, your gaze was down, like very,
Right.
yeah, just looking very like sad and
Collapsed.
collapsed.
Yeah.
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 Exactly.
What are the other common postures that you typically see? And is there like one or two that you see the most commonly in like the society that we live in, at least in the Western world?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I've always wanted to write a book about character armor as it relates to different cultures, because you do see
Yeah.
this stuff. Yeah, so there's six primary character armors. There's one that is, so one the first one is based off of the right, well, now I'm getting a little technical here, but basically the child or the baby gets the sense that it doesn't have the right to exist. So again, if I'm talking about if your mom is stressed while she's pregnant with you, the child will in some way feel like it doesn't have a right to be here, because there's so much stress.
Mhm.
So it kind of like pulls into itself, right? So like
Mhm.
imagine being in utero, there's stress hormones going on, it doesn't feel safe, there's nowhere to go. So what do? You
Yeah.
kind of pull into yourself, right? And
Mhm.
so that's one of the postures, which is like kind of this like pulled back. One of the shoulders gets kind of pulled back, almost like it's trying to like get away. But if you're thinking in utero, there's nowhere to go. So you're just kind of locked into this,
Huh.
trying to get away. So there'll be a lot of twists in the body as the
Mhm.
body has like tried to get out of the way, basically,
Yeah.
of this stress that it's literally swimming in.
Mhm.
Then the second one is that collapsed one, and their primary thing is around the right to feel their own emotions. So those types of people you'll see often will be people pleasers, because they invalidate their own feelings and like project it onto somebody else, or wants to have somebody else or wants to offer to somebody else so that they're accepted, right?
Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
are those people pleasers. So that's around your right to your own emotions. Then the next one, and this is one that I often see, is called is the endurer structure, and this is the one. Um, this type of person is locked into a pattern of outwardly trying to please but inwardly trying to resist. And so they'll know they don't want to do something, but they'll do it, and then like inside, I mean, it can cause angry outbursts, but also could cause a lot of digestive issues if it's not expressed. Now,
Mm.
that one is quite interesting. That one you'll notice also by the shoulders. It's not exactly a collapse in the chest, it's a
Mhm.
collapse in the stomach, and the shoulders are slightly rolled forward.
Mm.
Um, Often they'll have a little bit of padding in the belly area. And that's kind of as protection. And so they have issues around their own right. a right to their own autonomy and will, right? So their own personal power kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like the people pleaser, but different.
But different. Yeah. The people
Yeah.
pleaser is much more needy.
Mm-hmm.
And the
And it's to feel that like love and acceptance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the endurer is a little bit more like aggressive about it. Like,
Totally.
they'll do it, but I'm gonna be angry at you while I do it, or I'm gonna be angry at me while I do it.
Yeah. I love this because I mean, it's just fun. I mean, not fun. It's just interesting to think of people that we know, or like even reflecting on ourselves a bit as we listen to this.
Right.
You know, I'm sure
Right.
everyone listening is going to just get so much from this. But okay, what are the other three? I love this.
Okay. So then there is one that's called the rigid achiever, and that one is wounded at the heart by lack of approval. He or she will try to seek love through achievement. So if they're not achieving, then they're not worthy of love. So they often have issues with intimacy and interpersonal relationships and trust and that kind of thing. And their issue is around, the right to love and be loved. And so you'll notice that one, because this one will be very, very upright. And it's almost like these muscles in the back here, they get the message of, I have to hold myself up because nobody else is. And that's that. So if they don't feel like they can connect, well, and when I say they don't feel like they connect, usually it's because they have blocks to connecting, right?
Yeah.
So if they have blocks to connecting, then their nervous system is getting the message, I have to do this all myself. I can't depend on myself. So these muscles in here will be very rigid and upright and usually quite tight. And then there's another version of that, which is more related to women, but not always, or more related to feminine energy, let's say. And that's called the hysteric. And this is also related to that same issue around trust and interpersonal relationships, and it's normally related to feminine or women, because women typically have more, they kind of get the okay to express emotions versus men. So more men tend to be rigid achievers, except I'm a rigid achiever. So
I was wondering that when you're talking about the chess thing.
That's me. Yeah, that's me. So the hysteric would be similar, except whereas a rigid achiever typically will bottle the emotions and they will never come out, the hysteric will bottle them, but eventually there'll be an outward explosion of them. And those people, you'll notice, because typically in proportion, the lower portion of their body is going to be bigger than the upper part of their body. So it's almost like you'll see almost a bottleneck in their like waist area, where their hips are slightly bigger in proportion to the rest of themselves. And then there's also the challenger defender. And that one is an issue around communicating. So that one's the issue is around being able to clearly communicate their own wants and needs. Now it's really tied to, it is very much tied to first understanding what your own wants and needs are, having your own personal power and autonomy. So they're all like kind of interrelated. And if you don't know that, then of course you wouldn't be able to clearly speak your wants and needs, right? Because if I don't know who I am or what I want or what I need, how am I going to clearly communicate it? Right?
Yeah.
And this one is, has the issues are around the right to say and be heard and hear. And they're also they're called challenger defender because they're usually very much good at like challenging, protecting the kind of underdogs and challenging the like powerful ones. And you'll notice this one because they'll be very, their shoulders are, it's hard even for me to do, but their shoulders will usually be like, it's almost like you can see the energy from the lower part of their body coming up, but getting stuck at their shoulders. So their shoulders will be a lot
Like higher.
bigger, higher, sometimes broader. Necks are a little bit shorter, but if you think about it, it's like that bottleneck where all the energy is like coming up, but it's not getting out here. So it kind of just builds up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating. I love that. Have you written a book on all this?
Not yet. I'm in process.
Yeah, good. I was like, I would read this book. This is really cool. What was I going to ask you? I was wondering, because I kind of was wondering this with even myself. We start out with whatever our body armor is, obviously from like childhood and those experiences. But would you say that as we're adults, and if we do start to do work, that body armor can change? Maybe it like goes away, or can it go away, or can it like shift into kind of a different one at certain points of our life?
Yes.
And that's how we see like structure changing in the body.
Yeah, very, very good question. And yes, the answer to that is yes. Typically what you'll like, we'll have people sometimes have one as the primary. Like I was like rigid achiever all the way. But some people have like a combination that is like clear to see in their body. But yeah, as we do the work of releasing those unresolved emotions in the body, then the body starts changing as a result. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's not this like non-tangible emotion we're changing what's happening in the body and how the body is processing things. And therefore we're changing the way our muscles are reacting, our tissue, our posture. We're releasing all of that as we're working through it. So yeah, the structure starts changing, and oftentimes what happens is it reveals another posture that's underneath it. So as I relate this, I don't know if you've ever done like an extended detox or something, but the first things that detox out of your system are the most recent ones. And then as you keep detoxing, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's a similar thing. As we start doing that with our body, it keeps kind of pulling back and pulling back and pulling back until like, we, knock on wood, get to our essence.
Take some time.
Take some time. That's the goal. So yeah, it does change over time. And it really is a beautiful process to see. I mean, even for me, like I could see, and from like 20 years ago, I was like so upright, and now I'm like, I could like chill. I don't have to chill. I don't have to be so tense here. But it is really it's a beautiful process to witness and be able to kind of guide people through and to track too. It's such a great thing to like, because when I work with people, I do we do regular check-ins to see like what are you feeling now? And like, if people are coming into me with like, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, where, what's the anxiety? How does your body feel? Blah, blah, blah. And then like after, a month, 2 months, 3 months, doing these regular check-ins and obviously I see the changes in the body, I see the changes in them, but it's harder for them sometimes to see. It's like watching your own hair grow. You don't notice it until somebody points out, but you started at anxiety level 10 and now you're here, so it's a really good kind of feedback system.
Like a very tangible way to be like, hey, your shoulders used to be up here and now they're like half an inch lower or whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally. Would you say that certain emotions like anxiety, for example, would go more with I'm going to butcher the names of all these, the achiever type, like the one that you said that you were before, and that like depression or feeling down would go more with like, the first couple of body armor types and that sort of a thing? Do you find that tends to correlate?
There are correlations. I think anxiety and depression are, I'll give you the emotional correlations, but anxiety and depression, I think, really just comes out of whatever underlying emotions have not had a chance to express themselves. Then they will eventually, in some way, come out as anxiety and depression, because over the long term, like if I can't get this grief out of my system, of course I'm going to be depressed. Or if
Yeah.
I can't get this fear out of my system, of course I'm going to be anxious. So I think those emotions are the, like, when you can't get this out of your system, eventually it
Mhm.
leads to that.
They're more
Um,
like the like surface level, like broad terms for all of those deeper things that,
exactly. It's like
yeah.
those emotions, when I look at that, anxiety and depression, those to me are indications that something is going on in your body that you need to listen to. Those are the signals
Mhm.
that it's giving me. I'm anxious, I'm depressed chronically. So for me, that's actually a good thing, because I'm like, okay, that means something is not right here, because we are not designed to be chronically anxious or depressed. But now we have to get to what's underneath that?
Yeah.
Why is that coming up? So typically the first one is related to fear. The second one is mostly related to guilt. The third one is related to shame. The fourth one is related to grief. And the fifth one is, this is not an emotion, but it's there, it's related to like lying. So like if it feels like it's an untruth,
Mhm.
it I don't know what that emotion is,
Like
but
deceit,
deceit. Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like a self-deceit even,
exactly,
or yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So those are the underlying ones that are, and of course, when I say that, anyone can experience all emotions,
Mhm.
but that typically, like, those are the emotions that start the character armor. So if we think of that first one with fear, right? What I was saying, like in utero, if your mom is stressed, the baby is stressed because there's no separation, and stress to the nervous system is fear.
Mhm.
So that's that primary fear that the baby is going to be, the baby's going to feel, this place is not safe to be here. So it's going to feel fear. And then that could eventually lead to, when that fear is unresolved and kind of pushed into the body, that could cause over the long term anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, the second one being guilt. So you'll see that's like guilty about having their own emotions. So if you remember, their issue was like their right to have their own emotions, feel their own emotions. But if for some reason you got the message that your emotions are not valid, and again, when I say this, it could be big T trauma, like maybe your mom or dad or caregiver was like, didn't take care of you, and then you get the message, oh, my needs are not valid.
Mhm.
But it might be something like, maybe you're crying, and maybe if you're a boy and you're crying, and maybe your dad says, big boy, like, boys don't cry. So the child gets the message, oh, if I cry, then he's not going to love me, or
Mhm.
whatever that internal dialogue is. And so
Yeah.
then you start invalidating your own emotions, and then if you have an emotion, you feel guilty about it. So your emotions, like whatever emotions, are kind of tied up with this feeling guilty for having that emotion. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Totally. I have to,
Yeah.
like, just quick question, because I work with the chakras a lot. This sounds
Yeah.
like it like directly kind of lines up to the chakras.
So these
Um,
are, yeah, so I'm working with the character armors, so that's how it's locked in the tissue of the body,
yeah.
and also bioenergy fields and character. Yeah, and
Cool.
chakras. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing. I was like, what?
yeah.
This sounds exact. Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so then what's the next one that so shame.
Shame. Yeah. So shame is the next one. So that one is, so that one is, yeah, so similar, let's say for that one here, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example that some listeners might resonate with, but oh, here, I'll give you one as an example. When I was a kid, I have an older brother, 3 years older. And then my mom would always say to me, you can't do that now. You're too young and you're a girl. And then, I mean, this is a whole nother thing, but when I got to be my brother's age and and I was still a girl, she was like, you can't do that, you're a girl. But anyway, so that caused some trauma for me.
Yes.
But in that age range of the endurer character of that shame, then what it could have done to me was, well, now I've become ashamed. Like, I can't do that thing that I want to do because I'm a girl. Something must be wrong with me. I'm ashamed of me. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the messaging of that one.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for the next one, for the rigid achiever and or the hysteric, that would be, for some reason that person got the message that their, the connections that they had with their caregivers were not there, were not stable, couldn't be trusted. So then the nervous system picks up the message that people are not to be trusted. I am like the person, that person who experienced it typically has a disconnect. Well, everyone has a disconnect with themselves, but that they'll be disconnected from even trusting themselves. And by default, not trusting the universe as well. Like I had a big epiphany moment where, I've always had this sense of the universe has like we each have a purpose within this universe, let's say, and like the universe gives us signs, and like, we have free choice also, but we can like with the signs and all that stuff. But I realized that if I didn't trust myself, how could I then possibly be trusting the universe? Right. And so that I remember that being a huge epiphany for me, where I was like, oh, this whole time I thought I was doing it, and I wasn't. I wasn't, because I didn't trust myself.
I think that's really profound, because I think, I talk to all sorts of different people with all sorts of different things, and there's not a lot of people actually trust in the universe or in something greater, like to a degree where they really trust it. But I think that is a big disconnect for people who do have like faith and spirituality, but they can't fully access it because that trust isn't there. Just like if you don't fully love yourself, like you can't really fully be open to like giving and receiving love, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm glad you said that, because I think that's like, whoa, for a lot of people,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that goes back to the connection, which is what we started on, that like this is not we are not, none of this is separate. We're connected to ourselves. When we're connected to ourselves, we are connected to the universe. When we're connected to the other people, we're connected to ourselves and to the earth and to the universe. And it's all, you can't just do one. You can't just do one.
Totally. Full circle here.
Exactly. It is a work in progress, right? So based off of our experiences as children, that will determine, where we are disconnected in a lot of ways. But then the work is to reconnect to that part,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's my view on it anyway.
Love it. Yeah. Amazing. So that was that all of them we got through?
Oh, and then we have also the challenger defender. So the challenger defender is around communicating their wants and needs, the right to speak and be heard. And so that child would have gotten the message as a kid. So this is a later developmental stage. This is towards like like 5 to 7 or 8 years old. And that person would have gotten the message that it was not safe to communicate what they wanted. As an example, if something was happening, child didn't like it, child says, I don't like it, parent says, um, I'll give you something else. I'll give you another example from my life, which is if I was upset and crying, my father would say to me, now people are going to get the sense that I was traumatized. I was. That's not the sense that's not the sense I want to give people. But in any case, my father would say to me, I'll give you something to cry about. So, which I was like, Dad, you did. That's why I'm crying. but I guess the reason that I know,
This is so sad.
the reason that I'm saying that is because I got the message that it wasn't safe to communicate my feelings and my needs. And so how that shows up for me today, although I'm not the challenger defender structure, but again, I think we're all kind of, if we have an imbalance somewhere, it's affecting the whole. So we might resonate. Our bodies show us the primary and, or secondary ones. So, but we'll feel some commonalities and overlaps in all of them. So anyway, what that did to me in adult life is when someone was like, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. I don't know what I want. Because when I did express it as a child, it was received in a pretty, negative way. I got the message, I can't express it. And so that part of my system, I call it my want button, just turned off because I got the message it's not going to be taken care of anyway. So why even keep pressing on this button? So that's another way that, obviously these character armors, I was just trying to give little examples of how they might have been affected. So that hopefully your listeners can like resonate or understand this stuff.
I think you explained it really well. I love it. So cool. And this is something that we've never talked about on the show. And I've been doing this for a while. So I loved this. Yeah. Were there any other practices that we kind of skipped over when I kind of rewound us back to this? Any other practices for like moving the emotions and the energy from the body? And
so there's a bunch. I could sit here all day and talk to you about this. Another one, I just want to also, it's a practice, and this one you would have to do with someone else. And the reason that you would have to do it with someone else is because, if you think about it, typically people, when they're alone, they're like, yeah, I can take care of myself. I'm safe here, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is when you come into contact with other people, right? How do you behave in contact with other people? And that's usually where the issues start coming up. And if you think about that, the trauma happens, again, big T or little t trauma happens in relationship to your primary caregivers. So the healing has to happen in relationship with other people. Otherwise, it's just, you're just defending again. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
So based off of this, based off of the different character armors, I've created different practices to work with people just to see how their body reacts, to get in tune with what's going on with their body. And there are simple ones. So as an example, the person who is of the second character armor, the collapsed chest one, they'll usually be quite needy, right? And so what that says is they'll have very poor boundaries. And so one of the things that we do is I help them create boundaries. And those boundaries, there's a bunch of different boundary exercises that someone can do. One of them is a simple one where feet on the floor, you put your hands on the outside of the thigh knee and then press into the hands. So you're not like really doing it strong. You're just literally teaching your nervous system, this is where my body is. So it understands this is the boundary, right? Does that make sense? Then another one would be this is all boundary exercises, although they have other benefits as well, but boundary exercise. So one of them might be like literally touching, tapping. This is my body. This is where my skin is. And you're literally, again, now when we do this may seem like silly, like why am I doing this? But you may understand that this is where your body ends, but the nervous system has to understand it. So that's the difference between an intellectual understanding and an embodied understanding. We only heal when we have the embodied understanding, right? So this is teaching the body that it has a skin boundary. And then we could also teach the body that there's an energetic boundary, and it's real, like an electromagnetic boundary. So we could teach the body that. Another exercise is, this would have to be done in partnership, where one person stands in the center or in wherever, and then another person, let's say, is like 15 feet in front. You take one step forward, you take one step forward, take one step forward, or maybe the person asks you, move to the left, move to the right, move to the left, move behind me. And you just get the person in the center is the one who's creating the boundary. You're just getting them to sense what feels comfortable. How close can that person be, or how far away does that person need to be in order for you to maintain that safe boundary? Another one is a simple exercise, which is basically, so if you're in the standing position, you step forward with one foot while sweeping your arm up. So not this, not pushing forward, but if your arm is by your side, you sweep your arm up. So what that's doing, it's again, training the nervous system. This is my boundary. And when you, again, these are all embodied understandings, not just intellectual understandings. So those are some boundary exercises that someone can do in that character armor structure, if that's what they're in. I mean, those are good, like I said,
like a lot of people need boundaries.
Exactly.
Most people I talk to.
Exactly. I was going to say, it's not just for that specific character armor, although they typically have a big problem with that. They'll tend to like want to merge with people. So like they'll be very needy, and like I had one client who I was doing this exercise with, and we were doing the like boundary exercise of getting closer and farther. So I was like, okay, I'm going to step closer. And he was like, okay, closer. So I was basically almost here. He was like, closer. I was like, you have boundary issues.
Yeah. You need to widen your boundaries a little bit.
Exactly. So those are exercises that can be done specifically for that character armor and or people who have boundary issues. Another one for the rigid achiever and or hysteric would be literally, and this is such a simple one, but literally to lean back, whether it's on a chair or on a sofa or on a wall, and just to feel what that support feels like. And when I say feel it, like, most people, they sit back, they could feel the chair, but they're distracting, they're watching something, they're listening to something, they're reading something, they're not paying attention to what's going on in their body. So to lean back and to actually take time to notice what happens in your body when it feels that support behind you. Now, sometimes it will make people anxious, because if they're already not comfortable with allowing other people to support them, their body might go into stress response. That makes sense. Like when I first started this, I noticed when I relaxed my shoulders. So my shoulders are the part of my body that got the message, I have to do this all myself. I can't depend on anyone else. And so when I relax my shoulders and I lean back and I pay attention and I'm mindful of the support behind me, what I notice is my legs start getting anxious. Now, if we think about this in terms of a nervous system, this makes sense. So my defense is I got to do it all myself. Okay, I'm going to try to see, can I relax into it? Oh, when I relax into it, my legs are like, get away, get away, get away, get away. Right.
Yeah.
So this is all part of the process of understanding what's happening in the body, what the underlying emotions are, how the nervous system is reacting. And then from there, once we get that sense, we could start say, okay, so I notice that when I'm able to feel the support, I want to get away. Okay, so now what do I do with the energy in my legs? Well, now I have to teach my legs that it's okay to feel support. So I might do a grounding exercise. I might do some, I'm going to say squats, but I don't mean like fitness squats. I might do just some squats where I'm focusing on, as I'm coming down, as I'm squatting down, I'm focusing on also feeling the connection with the universe. And when I stand up, I might be focusing on rooting down. So I'm feeling both the support of the universe and the support of the earth underneath me. And again, when I say this, although yes, there is a spiritual component to this, I'm meaning this in teaching the nervous system this, right?
Yeah.
I'm not bypassing to this spiritual place. I'm saying, no, what this is doing is it's teaching my nervous system this. And so when my body feels this, then I can really embody all of that. Oh, my body gets the sense that it's safe here. My body gets the sense that I can feel support. Oh, now my body knows this. Now I know I can also allow people to support me. Now I also know that the universe supports me. So it's again, yes, there's spiritual component, but really I'm working with the nervous system so it understands this. This
Yeah.
all makes
Yeah. And
sense?
then, when the body feels that support, the right chemicals are being released so that your
Exactly.
mind feels calm. And then you can
Exactly.
actually open up to that like greater connection.
Exactly.
Back to connection.
Exactly.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you work with people online, in person? Do you want to talk about how
Yeah.
people can work with you if they're
Yeah,
really interested
absolutely.
in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I work with people online. I work with people in person. I do retreats usually twice a year, sometimes smaller groups. This weekend I'm doing a smaller group. But yeah, I do all of that. If people, can I share how people can contact
Yeah,
me?
please
Yeah.
do.
Okay. So my website is stacyberman.com, STACYBERMAN. I just say that because most people put an E in there. And then on Instagram, it's Stacy Berman PhD. So same as the name. And so, yeah, if anyone is interested in reaching out or just learning more, feel free, shoot me an email or something like that.
Perfect. I'll link it in the show notes too, so they could just
Awesome.
click and find you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, Stacy, I feel like I could talk to you all day long. This was such a
Yeah,
pleasure. Is
this
there
was amazing.
anything else you want to like leave people with before we say
Yes.
goodbye?
Yes. The thing that I would leave people with is that if your best thinking got you this far, if you are not happy with where you are, then look into the self. There's always something to be working on inside of you. And that's not to say you always have to be working on stuff, but that like, if you're not happy, if you're depressed or anxious or feeling stuck or whatever it is, most likely it's coming from within you, and that can be worked on. So in short, deal with your shit and shit will get better.
Yes. Mic drop.
Exactly.
So true. Yeah. And I mean, just to like kind of add, like feed on that a little bit. It's like, if you've been chronically depressed or anxious or anything like that, like you mentioned before, go deeper because it goes deeper. Right. So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
deal with your shit, people. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, Stacy, you're amazing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This was really fun. Maybe we'll have to have you back. I want to talk about plant medicine with you too. So maybe
Oh
we'll
my
have to
God,
do this again.
I would love to. And I would say also, if you want, and I don't know if you want, like I could totally do an analysis on you and or a few of your listeners, and we could kind of make that something. So I
Yes.
would love that. I would love that.
I would love that too. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk. We'll make this happen.
Okay,
Part
very
two.
good.
Part two is Stacy coming at you guys.
Excellent.
Well, thank you again, Stacy. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you.